Hi, everybody. I am not Roy Taylor, who was supposed to be here and got called to do actual work. Anyway, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad I was able to fill in. I'm happy to be here in Reykjavik and at Slush. It's a great conference, and it's been really enlightening listening to everybody this morning and this afternoon. So I'm going to talk about a number of things. And this is a theme, as you can see, that has been talked about a lot so far today, how the immersive nature of VR and this medium is going to change games forever. It's not just games, I think it's going to change a lot of things. So what you're seeing there is, on the left-hand side, is the kinetoscope that Thomas Edison invented in 1891. It was basically a device that you had to stick your head on to see graphical images. About 5 years later, the Lumiere brothers invented the cinematograph, where the term cinema comes from, which they basically added a sewing machine sprocket to the device to actually make the pictures move as opposed to just be a cyclorama. That's kind of the first time that we had this type of a display component, and it's been sort of similar for 121 years of the window, standing outside and looking in at content, at whatever the virtual world or world inside, whether it's television or a PC or consoles. VR has changed that significantly. What VR does is allows us to step through the window, step into the environment, have a completely immersive experience where you get to see, my son says, I get to look around behind stuff as opposed to being stuck looking at the front of it. So VR is estimated, we all get the same reports, we all read the same numbers. 97.4% of all statistics are made up on the spot. We all know this. But estimated 100 million users in the next 10 years for VR. That's a lot, but it's not soon enough. 10 years from now is a long time to wait for an installed base. John Petty Research has done some numbers, and they've got the tethered headsets, PlayStation VR, PSVR, Oculus, and Vive will be about 2.5 million, or 2.7 million, sorry, by the end of next year. That's not a whole lot. We've got headless without controllers, and then smartphone-based or Google Cardboard. All of these things, I think we turn up our noses a lot at some of the cardboard apps and those type of products, but they're gateway drugs. I have 2 grandkids, and all they want to do when they come over to my house is play with Google Cardboard. They play Crossy Road, they watch Invasion. They're willing to put up with a little bit less quality technology for the experience. I have yet to show them a Vive, but I'm going to do that fairly soon and see what kind of reaction they have. I think it's going to be, like most people. I was just at a conference in New York earlier this week, and we set up a Vive, and it was a 3-day conference. The first day was music, the second day was games, the third day is television. There were a number of people who'd never interacted with VR at all, and it was really interesting to see how there was a fair amount of trepidation by people. First of all, putting something on your head, VR hair, I think, is a term we all know. But when they did put it on, almost universally, the people who hadn't tried it before had the same kind of reaction, which was, wow, this is amazing. They'd start looking around. The demo we used most of the time was Space Pirate Trainer, I believe it was called. And so it's a short demo, and it's fun. It's an arcade shooter. You're standing on this platform, and these little drones come flying up, and there's a tutorial. And during the tutorial, the first part of it is the drone shoots at you, and you're supposed to do this to get out of the way of the laser. Most people that hadn't tried it before, they kind of did this. They didn't do anything. I said, no, you have to physically move. We actually were taking them and sort of saying, take a physical step to the side. It's not innately natural for people to interact with content this way, and that's one of the things I think we have to do. And somebody mentioned this earlier about having content that compels people. to interact with the experience. And I think that's one of the things that we need to spend a lot of time on. All right, we'll talk about some more numbers here. Maybe? There we go. So the install base for PC gaming, because ostensibly most of the stuff that we're talking about, or a lot of people are talking about, are tethered to a PC, or the content will be streamed from the PC, hopefully when the wireless stuff works better and more accurately. But Steam, for example, has 125 million active users. That was actually a year ago, or a little bit over a year ago. And Intel at IDF 2 years ago estimated there were 711 million PC gamers. That's a pretty good installed base. That's a pretty good base in which to sell product. We don't have that with VR. We won't have that with VR for a while. So what do we do in the meantime? So we've got, and I just want to talk about potential and opportunity here. You can see these are the top 10 gaming countries in the world. The population and then the internet population and the revenue. Overall revenue is about 75 billion. There was a report by Goldman Sachs that came out recently, and it talks about the revenue potential for VR, both hardware and software, by 2025. The software number was 35 billion. The hardware number was 45 billion. So overall, their numbers, they think their numbers are a little bit higher, but it's an interesting report. If you haven't read it, it's available on the web. You can just do Goldman Sachs VR report and you should find it. It's got a lot of information. It talks a lot about the companies that are working in this space, and it's not just headsets. It's not just graphics cards. It's not just PCs. There's a huge number of people who are working in haptics. Interface and control is one of those things that I think we are learning and spending more time on and need to spend more time on. Some people are, and I think that's going to evolve eventually. Obviously, we'll get there. So anyway, to the point of the talk, I want to talk about the impact of immersive technology on what we do as an industry and how it's going to change things. There's sort of four things I want to talk about: immersion, investment, tools, and experience. So we'll start with immersion. VR puts you through the boundary, and we've seen, I think we've all seen and experienced the fact that you have a much more immersive experience if you're in there and you're seeing people behind you and running around and whatever the environment is. The University of Virginia did a test to see what level of differences there are between the two sort of mediums that you use, whether it's VR or looking at a monitor on a desktop. And what they found was that people identifying objects when they were using VR did it about twice as fast as people who were trying to do it on a regular monitor. They've quantified it. It's science, but it does show a difference between the way people perceive the environment that they're in, whether it's seeing a 3D environment on a 2D display device or whether they've actually got a VR experience. So, and the immersion component, we all know that we're getting better about that. Has anybody here seen the Paranormal Activity demo? I got a video here. It's actually kind of fun. Can you run the video for me, please? Or not? I will now pantomime the video, or if you prefer, an interpretive dance. Yeah, see, I got no video. All right, well, there's the link to it. It's basically a bunch of people freaking the hell out from this demo. And it's if you've seen the demo, you're in a room, the lights are off, you have a flashlight, you have to find batteries, and then just stuff happens, and the reactions of people. If you watch the video, you'll see there's a guy going like, "I know this isn't real. I know this isn't real," and then he screams like a little girl. It's a visceral reaction. So, oh, there we go. We have a hand.
It's scary. I just heard something.
Paranormal activity VR was revealed at GDC recently, and everybody was talking about it. We wanted to see how scary it actually was, so we had the developers come here to IGN and had a bunch of IGN people play the game. Here's how scary it was.
Oh, Jesus. I'm in a room. Man, this is already not fun.
The child's music is not okay.
How do you turn on a flashlight in VR?
Need batteries.
Man, I really hate this a lot. Okay.
Well, that's really.
All right, we'll move on. It's worth watching the whole thing. It's pretty funny. It's entertaining. I also think there's going to be a whole new genre of entertainment on YouTube and Twitch, which is filming people in VR and their reactions and what they're doing, and then perhaps captioning it or voice-overing things. I think that might be interesting. So there's a business idea I just gave all you. Eve, I know Eve, there's been some presentations and talks, and Hilmar was here, and the presentation a little bit earlier about Eve. The difference is Eve started off as this 2D world, well, 3D world, but on the 2D environment. Again, you're looking through the window. CCP has been, I think, at the front of VR and doing some really interesting and experimental things with, and they've got the PSVR version out of Valkyrie out in the lobby. It's interesting how fast some people are gravitating and moving towards this. I think that's something that we need to do. That was I know that was another comment on one of the panels earlier today is, developers need to start working on this technology now. Because if you don't, you're going to be behind. You got to get on the bus at some point because you're not going to get down the road if you don't. And that's the point. Is with Eve, they've done that. They're moving towards that. The basic version of Eve Online is still incredibly compelling and immersive, and people spend hours and hours and hours a day in that. Imagine when they can actually be in the environment. So I talked a little bit about installed base. And some other things. This game, Battlefield 4, most of you have seen it. It cost about $120 million to make. They sold about 10 million units of it. That's of an installed base, what I said earlier, about 711 million PC gamers. So it's a small percentage of that, and the fact that, again, back to the Petty report that said 2.7 installed base, that's not enough. We need more than that. Someone was mentioning earlier about the hardware companies need to get more hardware out there. Well, that's something that we're working on. It's something that we're very passionate about, and this would be my blatant commercial plug number one. It's not really a plug. It's basically just a point that we shipped a product called the Radeon RX 480. It's $199. You can get a desktop that is VR ready and approved by the headset manufacturers for 699 euros. I don't know what that is in kroner. It's probably more than that, and in the US. But the idea is we had the opportunity to sell this card for a higher price because of the performance, but we want as many people as possible to be able to afford, either build or buy a machine that has compelling quality graphics that gives them the best possible experience. I was talking to somebody about this just recently about VR in general. We have really one big chance to get people engaged and immersed. We can lose a lot of customers by a poor experience. Someone mentioned earlier about the VR starting in the 90s. You may not know this, but I'm old. I've been around for a while. I actually was on the VRML steering committee back in '95, I think it was, and we thought that was amazing. Thought it was going to be all that. It was not. There was actually very little hardware in 3D hardware in that time frame too, so it was all software rendered. So it was more like PowerPoint than it was an actual experience. So anyway, there's as I mentioned, Eve is investing heavily in AR. AAA guys are looking at it. For example, Bethesda is working on Fallout 4. They said it's going to be out next year sometime. One of the interesting things was somebody that saw the demo. Their experience with it was they played through Fallout 4, but when they played the VR version, they had to play a little bit slower. They had to be more deliberate about what they were doing because there was so much more going on around them. And it became a different experience. As compelling, more immersive, definitely. So anyway, to help developers and publishers be able to get content more quickly into the hands of people, one of the things that AMD does besides make graphics chips and CPUs and other hardware is we spend an enormous amount of time and effort with software. Hardware doesn't do anything without software. So beyond drivers that we make for our graphics cards, we also build a lot of tools and technologies to help developers do things. We have a product called Liquid VR, which is a bunch of tools and APIs and an SDK that allows you to get up to speed quicker, to get better performance, and the rest of the tool chain. You can see there's these are all things that are being affected by and bettered by VR and the move to VR. I don't need to go into detail on all these. Most of you guys know what all of these things are, and one of the things that has changed a little bit is previs. I think previs is going to become more, well, it's going to be just viz, really. I think we're moving towards real-time visualization on stuff. This is, the two pictures up here is previs for a film. They use game engines a lot to do their previs work and set up everything. And you can see the film on the left, obviously. So previs and rendering are two things I think that are really critical because, again, VR doesn't need less pixels. It doesn't need less resolution. I know that's been stated up here a bunch too. It needs a lot more resolution to be compelling and get to the level of quality that we want people to have the most compelling experience. So rendering, I talked about that. I'll jump over that one. This next thing is light fields. This is another video. If you could run that one real quick, please. This is a.
My name is Pinchas Guter. I will answer any questions you might have for me.
How old were you when the war ended?
I was between the ages of 13 and 14 when the war ended in 1945.
We'll go on. That's a project by USC where they filmed Pinchas Gupta, who was a Holocaust survivor, built a hologram about it, and they have this really clever voice recognition software. So the questions that those kids asked, they do have a set sort of list of questions you can ask, and they give that to them, but it's basically an interaction with them, and it's a holographic unit that they've got. It's not completely VR and 3D, but it potentially could be. They're using technology like what all of you are using to be able to enable that. So, and I talked about resolution. Oops, sorry. We talked about resolution. There's some numbers here. There's a company called Imagine that's doing a 4K headset. There are a large number of companies in China who are building headsets with higher resolution and lower prices, which is going to affect the market, and then the race to resolution and the race to getting a bigger installed base. Matter of fact, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but in China, there's an estimated 300 VR cafes already that exist. I don't know. Someone told me there's one in New York. I'm sure there may be some other ones in the US somewhere, but they certainly aren't 300 of them. And that's one of the things about VR is it's challenging to find a place where any average person who wants to experience it can go. They've got it like in the Microsoft Store. They have it in Best Buy. They might have it some other places. They might be set up something at a mall for people to experience it, but most people, don't have the luxury of walking out into the lobby and seeing the Everest experience. So anyway, that's one of the things that I think is going to help accelerate getting to that point. We need a lot of pixels. I think the calculation is to get to the point of matching very close to eye resolution, we need about 81 times the graphics power that's shown right there. So this is blatant commercial plug number 2. I'm going to go right by that. All right, right by that. There we go. Oh, here we go. Yeah. So we need to get to 743 teraflops. That's a big jump. We certainly intend to get there. It gives us sort of job security and product security because we need to keep building better and faster chips. One of the other things that we're very passionate about is location-based, the stuff I talked about. This is a sort of a rendering of what could be in a theater lobby, so people can have a pre-experience before they go in to see a film. I talked about China. There's a company called 87870 who is actually building some of the cafes. And you can see the picture there of what they're like. It's basically a Dr. Evil chair, I think. Anyway, that part's accelerating. I think I'd like to see that. And actually, AMD is working with a couple of companies to be able to do this and set it up and make it available in these type of environments. Audio, I mentioned that earlier. It's really important. Oh, my time is up. So I'm going to go to that one. It'll impact everything. As we all know, I'm not telling you anything you don't really know, but we think the four sort of pillars of things that we need to work on right now are up on the screen there. So I don't think I have time for questions, but I'm around if you do have any, and you can get a hold of me there. Thank you.